Hey Richard, how are you?
I'm very good. How you been?
I'm great. I've been hearing about you from several contacts of mine, and of course about your work at ADGM. But before we dive into ADGM and the region and your perspective on banking and fintechs, I want to know about you. So maybe give us a little bit of a background, even before this role, other stuff that you did in the past.
Well, I spent all my life in financial services. By now, it's almost close to 30 years by now. I spent majority of my time in my prior careers in Singapore, where I started both with the Monetary Authority of Singapore and subsequently with the Singapore Exchange in predominantly regulatory role, although I spent 2 years in New York doing financial center development and business development for Monetary Authority of Singapore as well.
Yes, and by the way, I have lots of questions about Singapore. You know, the whole idea for the summit, we had a FinTech Nation summit like in September, and the idea of making a summit with all the FinTech nations and players together actually came to me because the finance ministry of the Netherlands said that the Netherlands needs to connect these FinTech bridges, and they need to focus in two countries. One of them was Singapore, and the other one was Israel.
That's great.
So I understand that you have a vast experience also in Singapore, and I want to, of course, dive into the MENA region and the opportunities in the UAE. Your current role, you are right now at ADGM, right?
That's right. I'm with Abu Dhabi Global Market, ADGM in short. So I'm the CEO of Financial Services Regulatory Authority in Abu Dhabi Global Market.
And what is exactly Abu Dhabi Global Market?
So it is a very new international financial center. We just released our 5th year corporate report. So we are in existence and operating for about 5 years now. So it's very, very new international center. It's a totally different regime. So we operate on a common law basis, common law regime. That's quite different from the other parts of UAE. Our rules and regulations, again, are very different from what you have within the UAE itself. So we are international financial free zone. Our rules and standards are really benchmarked to international. And in many cases, it is much more advanced than what you see in some other jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm. And how are you making the region attractive to other multinational players? Or, I mean, I understand that you are working with the regulatory, let's say open banking. How are you putting the blocks for the future development in that space?
I do think to start, the region itself is attractive because if you look at the much broader region, which include Middle East Africa region, it has very strong demographics. The number of young adults joining the workforce in the next 3 decades will surpass that of China itself. So you know the dynamics at play. There's plenty of need for services, including financial services. What the region was lacking was really the lack of financial intermediation, right? The lack of proper ecosystem. And when you're lacking in those things, unfortunately, you don't see as robust a growth that you should see, where different parts of the real economy are properly funded, are properly supported by funding. And that's where, when we first started, we started from a position of disadvantage of no track record, no recognition. People didn't know us at that point in time, and no financial institutions to start off with.
Wow.
But that gave us some leeway to think ahead, to reimagine what's the future state of the digital economy, of financial services, and to really understand where the gaps are. As I mentioned, there are plenty of gaps existing within our ecosystem, where the gaps are, and how do we, as not only a financial services regulator, but a financial services system, ecosystem developer, think about what are the things that we need to put in place, right, to get the entire economy to work properly. And we harness on the strength of Abu Dhabi to start off with. If you look at this region, it's a land of plenty of opportunity, right? You have many good companies, but most of these companies head overseas for listing. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, it has very good aviation company, 3 of the largest commercial aviation company in the world prior to the crisis. Right? Post-crisis, you will still have this three. But a lot of aviation financing, again, are not conducted here, they're conducted overseas, right? So how do we then anchor all these activities here in this region for the benefit of this region? Because once you build a virtuous ecosystem, the other parts of the economy will all benefit from it. So we went about in a systematic fashion to create a very holistic ecosystem to support the real economy.
And when did you start working on all of this?
I joined ADGM in March of 2015. By October 2015, which is 5 years back, we pushed for the launch of ADGM. Of course, there are some prior work before that, putting in place the regulatory framework, the systems in place. And that's where we started our foundation. And from there, we work with stakeholders, important stakeholders, both the government agencies, the government of Abu Dhabi, as well as all the different financial institutions, both locally, regionally, and internationally, to understand their needs. What are they lacking in this region? What do they hope to see? What do they need in terms of financing? And we built the ecosystem in a very systemic fashion. So as a result of that, we have developed a lot of new regulatory framework. We created, for instance, the first private real estate investment trust regime in this region, right? Because there's a demand for that. We created the first tailored VC manager, venture capital manager framework. And that has attracted a lot of VC managers to this region, investing in not only startup tech, but also SME sector and other fast growing sector. So that's where I think we make a key difference. In terms of the technology front, fintech front, which we are talking about today, we started the first regulatory sandbox in this region in 2016. We started small. At that point in time, I think most people in the region do not know what fintech is about. We started experimenting. We worked very closely with the entrepreneurs, the technology innovators, to understand what new business model they're bringing in, right? How they are reimagining the future, and what are the risks of some of this new business model. And from there, we understand much better, and we are able to put in place very calibrated and very tailored regime to support their growth while managing the risk at the same time. So by now, we have the widest range of digital financial services license available in this region, right? So from digital banking to digital payment services to digital asset exchanges to digital securities offering, right? So we continue to support innovation, support the growth while managing risk. And we need to do this two-dimension well. Without this two-dimension being managed well, you're not going to see sustainable growth.
Amazing. And you're talking about the government support and your organization setting the first blocks and everything. How does it look from the bottom up? How does it look from the small startup in the garage, from the entrepreneur? Where should they go to learn more about the opportunity, to get the guidance, and everything?
So it's both a bottom-up approach as well as top-down approach, right? So again, we don't work in silos. We work as part of a very holistic ecosystem, right? I mentioned Abu Dhabi Global Market ADGM ourselves. So by and large, we are a regulator and we look at the ecosystem. But to play that very important ecosystem role, we need our partners. And our partners are extremely important in that whole ecosystem building. So just take the fintech sector, for instance. Right? We work very closely. The Abu Dhabi government has come up with the garden funding, really investing into the future economy, the digital economy. And that is not only for the financial services alone, right? Many other sectors, real sector of the economy. So Abu Dhabi Investment Office is looking at many of these new areas of opportunity, including fintech, health tech, agri-tech, for instance, right? Clean energy, right? The wave of the future. So we work with them. We work with them to understand the opportunity, and they do invest, right? So the entire fintech ecosystem, if you look, the startup ecosystem, we focus on those. We work with the likes of New York University that has a big campus here in Abu Dhabi to really support that space in terms of incubation. And there are many other incubators within Abu Dhabi itself. Right? And then if you look at acceleration, which is extremely important, and that's where you mentioned bottom up. Some of these fast growing firms tell us, look, we need help in terms of how do we accelerate our growth. We say, okay, fine. We work with partners such as Plug and Play to help them in terms of their fast growth and acceleration. And Plug and Play is also a big VC investor in that space. And if you look at then adoption and deployment, we work with the likes of the financial institutions here, where they partner a lot of these fintech firms to deploy the technology. We work very closely with the central bank, which we are co-hosting the 4th FinTech Abu Dhabi Festival, which is the largest fintech gathering in this region, to really support innovation. The funding ecosystem is extremely important. Our sovereign wealth fund, Mubadala, Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, Abu Dhabi Holdings, right, have come up with different funding mechanism to invest both directly in the startups, fast-growing firms, as well as through VC firms into all these promising areas. So it's a very vibrant ecosystem that we have created. We have Hub 71, which is a startup ecosystem that Mubadala has created. And that comprises the likes of, they are working with partners such as Microsoft, SoftBank, to really support the ecosystem.
Yes. Thank you, by the way, for this overview. Now, finally, I talked to a person that gives me an holistic approach here, so I can understand all the players and how everything comes together. Because, you know, some people attend all kinds of webinars or seminars, and they're hearing this brand, and now you're giving me the more holistic approach. And by the way, feel free to throw some numbers and data for us to really understand what's going on over there.
Sure. So by now, within Abu Dhabi Global Market, we are situated on Al Maya Island. When I first started off, again, I told you that there are no financial institutions, no firms here. We started off with no track record. Today, there are about 16,000 people working on the island itself. There are more than 3,000 companies registered. And our financial center is the fastest growing financial center in this region. So we're very happy with that. Our asset under management continue to grow rapidly. The likes of Citibank, HSBC, Standard Chartered, the likes of BNY Mellon, Standard Life Aberdeen, State Street, etc. They have made this their hub to really support their growth into the region as well.
And what about the incumbents, like the banks? You mentioned some of international banks, but the other banks that are leading, and they're creating also new kind of banks.
Very strong support from the Abu Dhabi establishment as well. So the likes of Abu Dhabi Commercial Bank, their private banking outfit is here. The likes of Anglo Gulf Trade Bank, right, which is a partnership between Mubadala to set up the first digital bank. Right? We have many other local firms, both banking as well as securities firms, but not only local but regional firms and beyond. So we are supporting their growth. I mentioned trying to develop a complete ecosystem, a holistic ecosystem, and you need a good mix of both international players as well as domestic as well as regional players. Because this is a region of fast growth.
Yeah. So for me, you are a good resource to understand the region, the opportunity. You guys are doing an amazing work, and I'm seeing you speaking also in other conferences and festivals, and that's great because for somebody new like me who doesn't know the ecosystem, people like you are connectors and you're mapping up the ecosystem for us. And that's why I'm so happy that you are here on the summit, which, by the way, because we're focusing on a FinTech week that is mostly right now Israel and the UAE. Of course, we have other banks and FinTechs from all over the world. I want to ask you about your perspective on the relations and the opportunity here. You can talk about the FinTech, you can talk in general.
No, I really think that the Abraham Accord is landmark in terms of creating so much new opportunities and market access, right? And it's not only at the G2G level. It's not only at the government agencies level that we are pushing ahead with collaboration. In fact, I think the private sector, in many instances, move faster than us. I'm seeing new funds that set up to really invest in not only the fintech space, but the technology space. And exciting opportunities in the technology space are coming through very, very quickly. And we are very happy to support all those growth. Right? I mentioned we have seen a lot of new funds being launched, etc. And is deploying into the region. I'm sure going forward, given this new landmark agreement, many international investors, many players elsewhere are looking at this space very, very keenly to see how to support, how to really invest into those growth and support those growth. In the past 2 weeks alone, I've been speaking to a number of banks, a number of asset management firms. They all ask me this landmark agreement and how can they partake in many of these new opportunities going forward. So the future is extremely bright. We have created a much bigger marketplace for all our players. We have created a very exciting opportunity which a future generation can look forward to.
Amazing. Look, Israelis are very direct, and we say what we feel. And I just knew that this talk with you will be so important. And I really like what you're doing and your approach. And by the way, it's like fintech weeks like that, like this one, or the Abu Dhabi festival that are so important, that are opening the gates of fintechs, and these bridges are so important. So I wanted to ask you about open banking. I know we touched it a little bit, but if you can tell me what's going on. I know it's like the early days.
Sure. So I mentioned that we started our regulatory sandbox in 2016, and that has become a very, very successful sandbox. So it's now the second most active regulatory sandbox globally. And this year, we are moving from analog format from that regulatory sandbox into a digital laboratory, so a digital sandbox. And that will really support even more experimentation, collaboration between fintechs as well as the financial institutions. So we're going to launch it at this year's FinTech Abu Dhabi Festival. And this platform is API enabled. It has synthetic data for testing. It has all the security feature. So fintechs and financial institutions can collaborate, can co-create, can do plenty of experimentation under the guidance and supervision of regulators like ourselves at ADGM and the Central Bank of the UAE. So it's a great platform to really support things like open banking, open finance, and the adoption of fintech. If you remember, prior to COVID, a lot of banks are doing in-house development, and that's very slow. Okay? So this platform, as their need for digital adoption and deployment has accelerated sharply now. A lot of them need to work with fintech to bring about greater digitalization of their business operations. And this is a great format where they can post problem statements, they can post challenges on the platform, and the fintechs can work to solve those. And it will shorten the time for the financial institutions to adopt all these new areas, adopt technology that really support open banking and open finance.
That's amazing. Yeah, I probably have so many other questions to ask you, but we're running out of time, and I want people to understand how can they reach to you, how can they read more about your work and all that you're doing over there.
Well, we have a very good business development team. We have a very good website. So at any point in time, if you're interested, just go to our website, www.adgm.com, to look at our offerings. We have a tech license that really support techpreneurs, innovators in terms of their growth. Our business development team will really connect them with the right parties in Abu Dhabi, be it in terms of Hubs Anyone, to support them in terms of growth, possible partners on the financial institutions front. Please join us if you are available and register for our FinTech Abu Dhabi Festival as well. And we are looking forward to more bridges, more collaboration, more market access, and to support that faster growth and adoption within the fintech industry.
Amazing. Thank you so much for giving all this overview and bigger vision, the bigger picture here about the region and the opportunity. And I'm sure we will do also a follow-up interview also after the festival.
Absolutely. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.